This is the first generation Copa Icon, and it's a little plush. It's a little too padded for my taste, but it does have some nice amenities. It's got a nice heel area, a pretty responsive sole plate, and overall it's an okay package. It's good for some people, not really my taste. However, with the new generation of Copa Icon 2 in this box, I think we're gonna see something completely different from the first gen, and something that I think is actually worth top end consideration despite its mid-tier or even budget-friendly pricing. So make sure you subscribe to the channel before we jump into this review. We're gonna get into a playtest as well after we do the unboxing. So make sure you subscribe for all the new videos on the latest and greatest football boots. All right. Normal Adidas box here with the Icon 2, as you can see, big 3 stripes, and I went with my usual size 9 US per my old review as well for the previous generation, a UK 8.5, 27 centimeters, and a 26.5 China, or excuse me, 42 2/3 in Euro. That's what I was trying to go for. All right, so unboxing the Copa Icon. Now you guys have probably seen a lot of reviews on this one, but oh yeah. Oh yeah, wow, that is so much lighter. Oh my days. I was not expecting that because I got these in the mail, so with a couple other boots. So comparing these two is not even a question. That is remarkably lighter, way more streamlined here in the heel area, and similar plushness, but definitely a little bit thinner as far as the upper goes. So very impressed already, and we've just gotten these unboxed. So a couple things, the tech specs portion of this video is probably going to be pretty simple, to be fair, because it is quite a simple construction. Now, if we look at the differences between the previous model and the current model, you can see, number one, they changed the outsole. They changed pretty much everything about the upper other than sort of the general shape of the boot. These are a little bit on the slimmer side, but again, this leather forefoot is going to stretch quite a bit, and I think this midfoot as well, similar to the previous generation, is going to be just fine. But I think the biggest difference is look at how thick and padded this area is here on the previous gen, and then look at the new gen. That is crazy. Now, that could potentially come at a cost, so the heel area is probably one of the biggest issues I have with modern football boots, and that's because it is probably the most important part of lockdown. Yes, you need lockdown in the midfoot, you need lockdown when it comes to the rigidity and the ability for an upper to sort of wrap around your foot, but realistically, if your heel isn't locked in and it slides up and down, or it slides side to side, or rotates, or whatever, that's going to be a huge issue when it comes to general lockdown. So the fact that they've gone for a much thinner and more narrow heel area means one of two things. Either this is going to be absolutely remarkable, it's going to feel way more like an Asics or Mizuno product, which is a good thing, or it's going to go the complete opposite direction and it's going to be way too thin. It's going to be a lot more like the messy F50 and the regular F50, which just don't really fit that many heel areas that well, etc., etc. We'll find out in a couple minutes in the playtest and the try-on portion of the video, but in terms of general softness and stuff, that is really, really impressive for a cow or calfskin leather forefoot. The synthetic midfoot also feels pretty thin, particularly compared to last gen. Holy crap. That feels like a single or double layer right here where the stripes are, but that's no problem. This is like a complete it literally feels like there's memory foam in the lateral and medial sides of this boot, which is part of what made this boot kind of charming in some ways. It was just so padded that you didn't really have any fear of getting stepped on or anything, because the other player would have gotten hurt instead of you. And then they've gone for the AG traction frame, which is actually they're marketing it as AG/FG. And I love that Adidas are doing this, because what that does is it opens up what I think this boot actually did. And yes, you can see it's a lot more aggressive on the previous generation with the torsion frame from the Nemesis line. But I do think that this AG sole plate that's now on several of the Adidas boots is pretty snappy, to be honest. It's got nice rigidity here through the midfoot, and it's got all conical studs, obviously outside of this little, what do they call this? Traction 360? Nice. Traction 360, Cyclone 360. What is it with 360? The rotational BS, if you ask me. But anyway, point being is this is going to be great for all surfaces, which I love because more brands need to do this so that players feel comfortable, because nowadays so many players are playing on a combination of AG and FG. Doing this on just your single model as opposed to having just an aggressive FG and then just an aggressive AG, or not even having an AG model, is actually really nice from the Adidas brand. So from a heel area perspective as well, you do have some little bit of suede, kind of micro suede heel padding on the top end. Basically, like if my fingers were the padding, that's kind of where it goes, right along the top of that area. Very, very similar to a Morelia Neo 4 Beta, which actually I have up here and up there, although I don't really want to reach for them right now. But you get the idea, right? It's a much better heel area as opposed to having it be super, super thick, very, very padded. Not a bad thing, but I did find that my heel kind of rotated and slipped back and forth a little bit because it was so bulky. So I am very excited about these. I've heard such good things. People are raving about them. They're less expensive than pretty much everything else on the market, considering that they are, from a weight perspective and a softness and a quality and build perspective, they pretty much are a top-end football boot, and they're in Australia, they're about $60 or $70 less than a normal top-end model. So normal top-end Nike and Adidas are usually around the 360-degree Australian dollar mark. That's roughly where they sit. These are at 300 or just a little bit under 300 Australian dollars. In the US, it would be the same, right? Or in Europe, it would be the same. They're going to fall a little bit less than that normal top-end retail price, but they're going to have a lot of the aspects of a top-end boot. They also come with a runner's knot. So that is the most important thing right there. A good heel and a runner's knot. And then you are absolutely set. So without further ado, let's jump into the playtest and we will see how these go with our first try. Let's rock and roll. All right, fam, out here on the pitch for the first impressions and playtest of the Copa Icon 2. Copa Icon 2. There's so many Copas now. So Adidas has done really well with the update on Copa Pure 3. Really, really good on the new Copa Gloro 2. And I've heard from buddies of mine, Mark, GCFC Training, from Boot Wizard, and from Andrew Lockhart, Boot Reviews, like all those guys are saying these are top, top, top. So without further ado, let's just get these on feet. First impression. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, my days. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay, sizing is excellent straight away. I like that they went for something a little bit more neutral here, particularly, and by neutral, I just mean I like that they went for something a little bit less like crazy padded. The previous generation Icon was almost too much. Like, I didn't really rate it. It's fine for some people who really want that, but I just didn't rate it all that much. Now, with the, I am going to tie the runner's knot because I do think that's just going to help the overall playing experience, and for a boot like this that feels super comfortable straight out of the box, I do think that it's not going to be an issue in terms of break-in. Oftentimes what I'll do is I won't tie the runner's knot straight away just because I want to make sure that I can actually break the boots in without tying them super tight. But that is not the case with these because the leather, the calf leather on these is really, or premium cow leather, whatever you want to say. I don't really care if you call it calf leather or not. It doesn't matter. But it is what's the word for cow? It's bovine material. So yeah, it is really really soft, and I would say it's probably on par, although it's a little thinner. So it feels a little softer than previous gen, but it does feel from a materials perspective, it does actually feel quite similar. Now, wow. Oh my days. Oh, geez. Adidas is just leveling up in every way. This is also the first sole plate that Adidas is kind of coining as AG and FG, and immediately I notice sort of the neutrality and just, it's very balanced. on this artificial ground surface. You've got good dig, but good pivot power as well, which is a really good start, really good start. One of the major issues I usually have with football boots is in the heel area as well. And I think this heel area, or at least from a design and from a feeling perspective, feels incredibly similar to the Copa Pure 3, the new one. And I think they've not perfected it yet, but it's so much better than the previous generation of both of those boots, both the Icon 1 and Copa Pure 2. So I am kind of already frothing at the mouth about these, especially in the midfoot. They're super comfortable. I have really wide feet, as you guys know, and I'm fitting in these basically perfect from a sizing perspective. I'll show you guys on the up close camera, like perfect. Like that is exactly what I want. And if you look at, can wiggle my toes, no problem. And yeah, solid Adidas, man, solid for this price point. All right, so one of the things that I was pretty shocked by, to be honest, with the previous generation was how thick they managed to make the midfoot feel on that Icon 1. And I love a football boot that I can kind of feel. That's one of the things that I didn't really like about the regular Tiempo 9 was that kind of pass pad. But with this one, they've made the cow leather and the synthetic much thinner. And so the manipulations of the ball through these cones feels a lot more natural as opposed to the previous gen, which just felt like completely disconnected from your foot. So again, another upgrade point. And speaking of thickness, forefoot obviously feels a lot better in terms of feel on the ball. Like as I'm moving the ball through like this, it's a lot thinner feeling. Again, you're on the thicker side in general, but that's sort of what you expect from a boot that's constructed like this. That being said, again, compared to previous generation, it's miles better in my opinion, but these are a lot more on par with, I would actually say the thickness of the Gloro 2 is now a little bit thicker than these. So they're a little thinner than Gloro 2, definitely a little bit thicker than, it'd be like the thickest one is Gloro 2 now, then it's Icon, then it's Copa Pure 3. So yeah, but these are, I would say these are on par with like a Morelia Neo, still a little bit thinner than this, but you get the idea because it is cowhide, so it's a little bit thicker in general. But no, good feel on the ball in the forefoot, and I'm already like super able to wiggle my toes, which is great from a break-in time process. I do wonder with the upper, and we'll find out right now, whether the forefoot, well, nah, that's just that dog in me. Come on. Okay, so one thing that I am interested to know, because this was the sort of the downfall of the 99-gram leather boot, was the difference in the synthetic midfoot and the leather forefoot was so different that it made striking the ball just a little distracting. Whereas I feel like, near post, nice. I feel like with these, it's a little bit more seamless. Like I know they're sort of not comparable. Number one, because those were limited, and number two, because of the price point, but I do feel like in past, it's a little bit hard sometimes for leather, and I would say Neo 4 Beta suffers from this as well. Is like the transition between the really thin knit and the leather is just, it's not my favorite in the world. Whereas this feels a lot more natural and seamless. They've done a nice job with that sort of connection point, and they've kind of nailed the thickness of the midfoot synthetic material. Now, I mentioned this in the beginning, but one thing that I haven't really talked about is the sole plate. And I think that the sole plate featured, how do I say this? Because I haven't mentioned the sole plate, usually that means that it's performing exactly how I expect it to, which is a good sign. So get in, a little bit more. Gotta whip that a little bit more, open up my hips, you know? Hips don't lie. Thanks, Shakira. So that's a great thing. And I think in terms of the, we'll go one more. In terms of the balance and the responsiveness of the sole plate, balance, nailed it. No problems at all. Responsiveness maybe could use a little bit, but again, it's one of those things that, you know, at a pseudo budget football boot price, it's not that big of a deal. Wow, it's just aimed right at that cone, isn't it? So when I think about, okay,
does the new Copa Gloro sole plate, Gloro 2, fit with that boot? Yeah, it does. It's not like total dog anymore. Better shot, just right at the goalkeeper. That was like a moment. Does the sole plate match these ones in terms of structure, stability, kind of composition with the upper? I think it does. I think it does. It could use a little bit more snap, especially because it's sort of a downgrade, if I'm honest, from the torsion frame. I think that's what it's called, right? From the Nemesis line that was on the previous gen. But again, I'm sort of being nitpicky here, but I do think in general, this sole plate will be totally fine. And again, it's suitable now instead of just an FG plate. It's like FG and AG, which is kind of nice. You buy one boot and you're good for an entire season. And a boot that's this comfy is like kind of hard to get around. So I know it probably doesn't feel like I'm ragging on these as much as I should. And that's because I think for what Adidas has done from an improvement standpoint is really worth commending. With the Predator, the Copa, the Icon 2, the Gloro 2, the F50 is really the only one that I think needs actual work. But again, for what you expect the Copa to be, the Copa Icon 2 to be, this boot, you really don't expect it to be much else than what it is. And I think with the previous generation, it sort of was like, it's too thick, the sole plate is too aggressive for what the upper was. There wasn't a whole lot of like cohesion as far as the package goes, and it was just outrageously padded compared to everything else on the market, and there wasn't really a market for that. And so, oh no, now you have this boot like the Icon 2 that really does a lot of things well. And I think from my point of view and what I prefer, I think I'm still gonna go with something like, I don't know, like I'll probably still go with something like the Lux Tiempo, even though it's synthetic. But let's take all synthetics out of the market. Again, this has to compete with Mizuno Elite models. It has to compete with some of those other things, Asics boots that are this price. And those two are just, a step ahead. So as far as value add from like a microcosm of like the Adidas Nike Puma box, these are up there as far as, obviously there's only a couple leather boots in that world. But as far as like the big brands go, these are a pretty good bargain. They're light, they're comfortable, they break in well, and they just do everything really nicely. But again, they're not quite up to par with where the Mizuno and the Asics and the Adler companies are. So more on that in a sec. So now really the consideration in terms of sort of the unfortunate point where Adidas is at right now, and I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way, but just they're creating leather football boots that are sort of now have to compete in some senses with the Mizuno, the Adler, the Asics. And I've talked about this in the Copa Pure reviews in the past, but I don't think they're up to that par. Now, because Tiempo is no longer a leather boot, it then calls into question, okay, so if you're not gonna pay Adler, Mizuno, Asics prices for stuff, are you gonna buy these? Are you gonna buy the Copa Gloro 2? Or are you gonna buy the Copa Pure 3? And I do that as like an indication of where the price points are. For me, I think this is kind of uniquely right in the middle of those, two. And I would say that this is kind of, in a lot of ways, the best value prop, because Gloro 2 is really good. Pure 3 is much improved, but for the price point you're paying for Pure 3, it's not quite where it needs to be, considering some of the Asics and the Adler boots, which are equivalent in terms of pricing to the Pure 3. So this is kind of that like sweet spot middle ground for under $200. Leather, comfortable, remarkably lightweight, and just an overall nice boot to wear. Right, so wrapping up the review with a couple of free kicks. I think for me, okay, so what am I picking personally? I think I like that the Pure 3 has a little bit more responsive and nice sole plate to it. Oof, almost there. But I do think that for a compelling package, despite the Pure 3 having a little bit more of a seamless sensation on feet because of how nice the fusion skin is, right? It feels like one solid material, plus you have that knit in the midfoot. So I think that boot is a little bit more streamlined. Oh, wow. Just way too hard. In terms of actually what I'm gonna probably wear more often, I honestly think it's gonna be these, because I think from a width perspective, these fit me better. They're a little bit more thick than what I usually like from a leather upper. However, given the price point, given that they've got infinite amount of possibility from the colorway, damn, oh hell yeah, I'll just take this one again. From a colorway perspective, it really kind of begs the question then. It's like, okay, well, I'm probably picking Icon 2, I think. I like the Gloro a lot. In fact, if you guys saw my review, you guys would know, right? Glowing review of the Gloro 2. I think it's a really good football boot for such a inexpensive price, and it's the only one now at that price point that's leather. A little bit better. First one was the best. So yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about it in the conclusion. So in terms of the Copa Icon 2, massive fan. I know there was a lot of hype around this. Everyone was comparing it to the Neo series. People were saying it's the boot of the year already, blah, blah, blah. Hold your horses. There's still a lot of time to go. I would say I'm not personally as insanely stoked about these as everyone else, but I'm very excited about them. So that doesn't mean, again, I'm not saying that I'm not excited about them and pumped about them, but I am not like raving about these like some other reviewers are. However, I think, in my humble opinion, if you're gonna buy a leather boot from Adidas, this is the one you should buy. I think it's lighter than everything else on the market in the Adidas lineup. It's got, needs a little bit of work from a sole plate perspective, but if you're a player that wants a budget-friendly football boot that you only have to buy one of, that you can wear on AG and FG, this is your boot, right? This is the boot you go for, because it's got the AG FG sole plate. It's totally grounded, it feels good. It is a downgrade from last generation, unfortunately, but the leather and the synthetic upper are an upgrade. So that's and the heel area. So the rest of the boot is a total upgrade from the previous gen. So for me, if you're gonna buy a leather football boot from the Adidas brand, this is absolutely the one you buy, because I just think it's not worth going to the Copa Pure 3, as much of an update as that boot is. It's not quite where it needs to be for the price point, whereas this one is exactly what you expect for this price point. It's not perfect, but it is damn good. And I am really excited to keep going with these. The leather has softened up completely. Obviously didn't even take the boots off, and this was the first time I'd ever put them on. So that's a huge, for those of you who are, really wide-footed, I think these are actually gonna fit you really well. And I think this is one of those boots that, now I guess sits on the list of boots that, the very small list of boots that I don't have to break in, because they were really nice for me straight out of the box. So that is a big thing. They've also put a runner's loop there, improved heel area. Really not much to say about this. I think if they had either kept or made this sole plate with the same traction, but a little bit better from like a responsiveness perspective, you'd be looking at a boot that, again, I think the reason they did that was because this boot would end up being better than the Copa Pure 3, like in every way. So, and I think more people would buy this. But of course they want you to buy the most technologically advanced one, the one that they've spent the most time developing and the money developing and all that stuff. So I get it, Adidas. I totally understand you have to have your tiers of football boots, but I think now Adidas can confidently say they've got 3 tiers of leather football boots that are all 3 thumbs up recommendations for me. Again, so long as you fit in them, they are really good. So hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you do like this new format with the play test along with the unboxing, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, be awesome, take care. See y'all in the next video.